I was standing in the fellowship hall of Grace Community Church in Austin when my stepdaughter said it out loud, clear as a bell, with her chin up and her eyes locked on mine. "The greatest gift for my wedding," she said, "would be if you disappeared from our family forever." The room went quiet. Folding chairs, white tablecloths, a half-empty tray of sugar cookies. I waited for my husband to laugh it off. I waited for him to say something. He didn't. Mark just nodded. That was the moment. Not loud, not dramatic, just a small, ordinary nod that felt like a door closing somewhere deep inside my chest. 3 weeks later, they would be standing in that same hall, voices raised, faces red, staring at an empty house and asking how everything could fall apart so fast. But back then in that quiet room, all I did was breathe in and count to 3. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't beg. I just looked at Emily, 28 years old, hair in a tight bun, wedding binder pressed to her chest like a shield. And I said, "All right." She blinked like she hadn't expected that. Now let me back up a little. My name is Sarah Gallagher. I was 54 years old that spring, living in a quiet suburb of Austin, Texas. I'd spent most of my life as a master electrician, one of the few women in the local IBEW union for decades. 34 years of early mornings, crawling through cramped attic spaces in the Texas heat, and hands that never quite stopped buzzing. Even when I tried to sleep, my knuckles were thick, my fingers half numb from years of crimping wires and tightening lugs. Mark and I had been married for 12 years. He came with a daughter, Emily, who was 16 when I met her. Her biological mother was long gone. I didn't try to replace her, I just showed up. I was there for the school pickups, the flat tires, the driver's ed practice in the high school parking lot. I taught her how to parallel park in my old Ford F-150, my foot hovering over the brake, my voice calm even when she hit the curb. She used to call me Sarah, then Mom, then somewhere along the line, she stopped calling me anything at all. Our house sat on a quiet cul-de-sac with live oaks and mailboxes shaped like little barns. I'd put the down payment on it with my savings. My name was on the mortgage. Mark's was too. Emily liked to call it the family home, especially when she talked about hosting bridal showers and pre-wedding dinners there. The wedding had taken over everything. Venues, caterers, florists. Emily's voice was constantly on speakerphone while Mark paced the kitchen, nodding, smiling, saying, "Of course, sweetheart." I paid for most of it without complaint. That's what you do. I told myself, you invest in the people you love. The meeting at the church was supposed to be simple. Final head count, seating plan, who was sitting where. Emily stood at the front with her binder, flipping pages like a corporate project manager. Then she cleared her throat. "There's just one more thing," she said, looking at Mark first, then at me. "I don't want any awkwardness on my wedding day." Mark shifted in his chair. I knew that shift. He did it when he didn't want to choose sides. "People might get confused," Emily went on. "I mean, you're not really my mom." I nodded once. That part didn't sting as much as she probably thought. "And honestly," she said, "it would mean a lot if you just stepped back. Like, completely. The greatest gift would be if you disappeared from our family forever." I turned to Mark. 12 years of marriage, shared bank accounts, quiet Sunday mornings. I searched his face for something. Anything. He nodded. I remember noticing how loud the clock on the wall sounded after that. Tick, tick, tick. "All right," I said again. That night, I packed a small duffel bag. Jeans, work shirts, my toothbrush. I left the rest, the family photos, the couch ID reupholstered, the garage shelving ID built with my own hands. Mark watched from the bedroom doorway. "Sarah," he said, like he might add something else, but he didn't. I left my house keys on the granite counter next to the wedding binder. I slept in my truck that first night, parked behind a Denny's off I-35. The smell of grease and cheap coffee drifted out every time the door opened. I sat there with a foam cup of bad coffee, hands wrapped around it, staring at nothing. By morning, my phone was full of messages. Missed calls, confused texts. Emily asking what stunt I was trying to pull, Mark asking where I was. I didn't answer. Instead, I drove to the job site, pulled wire, tightened screws, and did my job. The world didn't end just because my marriage had. During lunch, I sat in my truck and looked at the mortgage app on my phone. The payments I'd been making alone for years. The insurance policy in my name. The deed I'd signed without thinking much about the fine print at the time. Disappear, I thought. All right, I would. But disappearing didn't mean vanishing into thin air. It meant stepping out carefully and letting everything they leaned on feel the weight of that absence. I started my engine and drove toward the city, toward an old real estate office with a faded sign I'd driven past 100 times. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was just done. I didn't go straight in. I drove past it once, then circled the block, my blinker clicking like it was keeping time with my thoughts. I wasn't shaking. That surprised me. I'd always assumed something like this would come with heat, yelling, maybe a cracked windshield or a slammed door. Instead, I felt hollow, like someone had scooped me out and forgotten to put anything back. I pulled into a gas station, filled the truck, and sat there longer than I needed to. An old guy at the next pump nodded at me. We exchanged the kind of look people who work with their hands share. No words, just acknowledgement. You still here? Still breathing? I checked my phone again. Another text from Mark. Sarah, this has gone far enough. We need to talk. I typed back, erased it, typed again. Then I locked the screen and slid the phone into the center console. Talking was what they'd done, deciding without me nodding. By mid-afternoon, I found myself parked outside the local branch of University Federal Credit Union. I'd been banking there since long before I met Mark. Inside, the air smelled of carpet cleaner and toner. I need to look at a few accounts, I told the teller. Joint ones. Everything was calm, ordinary. Life kept moving like nothing had happened. We went through the paperwork. The checking, the savings, the one we'd been using for wedding expenses. I didn't close anything yet. I just asked questions, took notes, and listened. When I walked back out, I sat on a bench for a minute. I felt older than I had that morning. That night, I stayed in a cheap extended stay motel off the interstate. Beige walls, a bed that dipped in the middle. I lay there staring at the ceiling, thinking about the house, the way the porch steps creaked, the smell of Mark's cologne. I thought about Emily at 16. White-knuckling the steering wheel while I coached her through her first left turn. Easy, I'd said. You've got time. Had I? The next morning, I went back to the house while they were out. I used the spare key I still had. I walked through rooms that suddenly felt staged, like I was trespassing in my own life. I packed a few more things. My professional toolbox, a framed photo of my father, the heavy work jacket I wore for outdoor winter jobs. I didn't touch anything that screamed wife, the wedding album, the matching mugs, the throw blanket Mark liked. On the kitchen counter, the wedding binder sat exactly where I'd left it. Sticky notes, color tabs, everything organized to the minute. I closed it gently. By the time Mark got home that evening, my side of the walk-in closet was empty. He stood there with his arms crossed. You're really doing this, he said. I am, I replied. You're punishing us. I looked at him then. Really looked. The lines around his mouth, the way he avoided my eyes. No, I said. I'm stepping back. Like you wanted. He opened his mouth and shut it. Emily didn't mean she meant it, I said. And you agreed. That was when his face changed. Not angry, not sad, just uncertain, like he'd finally realized something was moving that he couldn't stop. Over the next few days, the calls escalated. Emily left voicemails that swung from furious to panicked. You can't just leave, she said in one. Do you know how this looks? Mark's messages were quieter. We can fix this. Please come home. You're hurting everyone. I didn't respond. Instead, I met with Dave Miller, a realtor I'd known for years in the Austin area. We sat in his small office with a pot of burnt coffee between us. You're serious? He asked, flipping through the paperwork. I am. He leaned back and studied me. Fast sale or? Clean, I said. Dave nodded. You know what that means. I do. Signing the listing agreement felt heavier than I expected. Not because I doubted it, but because it made everything final. The house would sell. The wedding plans tied to it would unravel. I knew that. That night, Mark showed up at the motel unannounced. He knocked until I answered. You're tearing everything down, he said, eyes bright. For what? I didn't raise my voice. For myself. He laughed then, sharp and brittle. You think this will end well? I think it will end, honestly, I said. He stared at me like he didn't recognize me anymore. Maybe he didn't. The next morning, the for sale sign went up on the lawn. By afternoon, my phone exploded. Emily screamed. Mark cried. Someone from the wedding venue called, confused, asking who still had authority to approve events at the house. I let it ring. Disappear, they'd said. I was doing exactly that, quietly, legally, one piece at a time. And the more I stepped away, the more I realized how much of their world I'd been holding up without ever being thanked. That realization didn't feel like victory. Not yet. It felt like the ground shifting under everyone's feet, including mine. By the end of that week, I understood something I hadn't when I first packed my duffel bag. Disappearing wasn't a single act. It wasn't a slammed door or a dramatic goodbye. It was a series of quiet absences, small supports removed one at a time, like pulling nails out of a board and watching it finally sag under its own weight. The house went live on the MLS on a Thursday. Dave texted me a photo of the listing. Bright pictures, wide angles. The lawn looked greener than I remembered. I stared at it for a long time, trying to feel something. Sharp regret, triumph, anything. But mostly, I just felt tired. That night, I sat in the motel room with the TV on low. My phone buzzed again. Mark. Emily's in tears. She says you're humiliating her. I set the phone face down. A few minutes later, it buzzed again. Sarah, please. We can talk. Just come home. Home. The word felt loose now, like it didn't belong to me anymore. I thought about the first winter in that house. How I'd woken up early to de-ice the driveway before work so Mark wouldn't slip. How I'd replaced the water heater myself to save money. How Emily had brought her friends over and laughed loud in the kitchen, never worrying about bills or property taxes, or who made it all possible. The next morning, I drove to the Travis County Records office. It was a squat concrete building with fluorescent lights that made everyone look a little sick. I took a number and waited. When my turn came, the clerk pulled up the deed. She read off the names. Mine came first. I nodded. That's what I thought. On the way out, I sat in my truck and rested my forehead against the steering wheel. For a second, just a second, I wondered if I was going too far. Then my phone rang. This time it was the wedding venue. Miss Gallagher, a woman asked, polite but firm. We're calling because there seems to be some confusion about the property being used for the rehearsal dinner. There's no confusion, I said. The house is being sold. Silence on the line. Well, she said carefully, without confirmation from the homeowner and proof of insurance, we can't proceed. I understand, I replied. When I hung up, my hands were shaking. Not with fear, but with adrenaline. Because now it was real. Now the consequences were moving beyond angry messages and hurt feelings. That afternoon, I went back to work. I climbed a ladder in a retail strip and rewired a lighting panel. My hands moved on autopilot, strip, twist, cap. My body knew what to do, even when my mind didn't. During my break, I ate a dry turkey sandwich in my truck and watched a young couple argue in the parking lot. I wondered which one I'd been all these years. That evening, Emily texted me directly. You're ruining everything. You always do this. You make it about you. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. I thought about the night she'd called me from college, crying because her car wouldn't start. I'd driven 2 hours in a storm to pick her up. Didn't even hesitate. You're my hero, she'd said back then. Half joking, half not. I didn't reply. Instead, I called my insurance agent, Linda. She knew my voice. Sarah, is everything okay? I'm selling the house, I said. I need to make some changes. She walked me through it, professional and kind. By the end of the call, another thread had been quietly pulled loose. That night, Mark showed up again. This time he didn't knock. He just stood outside my truck in the motel lot while I sat behind the wheel, the engine off. You're hurting Emily, he said through the open window. I didn't start this, I replied. You're her mother. I said gently, until I wasn't. His mouth tightened. You're enjoying this. I shook my head. I'm surviving it. He leaned closer. If you keep going, There's no coming back. I looked at him. Really looked. You already decided that, I said. You just didn't think I'd accept it. He stepped back then, like I'd pushed him. The first offer on the house came in 2 days later, slightly under asking. Dave called me, voice cautious. We can counter. Accept it, I said. You sure? Yes. Hanging up, I felt a weight settle in my chest. Not dread, but finality. Emily's wedding dress was still hanging in the guest room closet. I knew that I'd helped install the custom shelving myself. I pictured it there, untouched, waiting for a day that was slipping further out of reach with every signature I signed. That night, alone in the motel, I pulled an old photo from my wallet. Emily at 17, sitting in the driver's seat of my Ford, grinning like she'd just won the lottery. I sat there for a long time, listening to the hum of the vending machine down the hall. Disappearing, I realized, wasn't about punishment. It was about letting go of the illusion that love once given would always be returned. And once I saw that clearly, there was no turning back. The sale closed on a Tuesday morning. I know because I remember the sound the pen made when I signed the last page. A soft scratch, nothing dramatic. Dave slid the papers toward me, tapped the corner into a neat stack, and said, "That's it." "That's it," I echoed. 12 years of mortgage payments, 12 winters of maintenance, 12 summers of mowing that lawn while Emily sat on the porch scrolling through her phone, asking if I'd seen her sunglasses gone. I walked out of the title office into a parking lot full of ordinary cars. Life kept moving, unaware that something I'd built was officially no longer mine. Dave clapped me lightly on the shoulder. "You all right?" "I will be," I said. I believed that, mostly. The call started before I even reached the end of the block. Mark was first. "What did you do?" he demanded, breathless. "I sold the house," I said simply. "You can't." He yelled, but I already had. He went quiet and softer, sounding defeated. "The wedding venue just called me. They canceled the rehearsal dinner. They said they can't move forward without access to the property." I pictured Emily's binder, the color-coded tabs, the timelines planned down to the minute. I imagined her standing in the kitchen of a house she no longer owned, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it in the only way that still mattered. "You're destroying her dream, Sarah," Mark said. "No, iraplia. I'm just stepping out of it." By afternoon, the florist had canceled. The band followed. The caterer left a voicemail asking who was now responsible for the outstanding balance. Emily called me from a number I didn't recognize. I answered before I could stop myself. "You sold the house," she screamed. "Are you insane?" "I warned you I was disappearing," I said calmly. "You did this on purpose." "Yes," I said. There it was, the truth, finally out in the open. "You're ruining my wedding," she cried. I closed my eyes. For a moment, I almost saw her as she'd been at 8 years old, holding my hand in the parking lot of the Barton Creek Square Mall, afraid of getting lost. "This isn't revenge," I said. "It's consequences." She hung up. That evening, Mark came to the motel again. He sat on the edge of the bed, shoulders slumped, staring at the cheap carpet. "She's embarrassed," he said. "Everyone knows." "Everyone knew I existed, too," I replied. "Until they didn't want me to." He looked up, eyes red. "I never thought you'd go this far." "I never thought you'd not," I said. The room went still. 2 days later, the buyer scheduled an open house for the weekend. Yard signs, balloons tied to the mailbox, strangers walking through rooms where my life had happened. Emily showed up during one of the showings. I wasn't there, but the neighbors told me later about the raised voices, the slammed doors, and a young woman crying on the front steps while potential buyers pretended not to look. That night, my phone buzzed with a message from an unfamiliar number. "Sarah, it's Rick from next door. Just checking in. Didn't seem right, you not being around." I stared at that text longer than I should have. A neighbor noticed my absence before my own family did. The wedding was officially postponed the following Monday. Postponed. They said it like it might come back if they waited long enough. Emily posted a vague message on Instagram about toxic people and setting boundaries. Mark stopped texting altogether. I moved out of the motel and into a small rental on the edge of town. 1 bedroom, thin walls, a porch just big enough for one chair. The first night there, I sat in that chair and listened to the hum of traffic on the highway. No shouting, no wedding plans, no binder. Just quiet. But the quiet didn't feel empty anymore. It felt earned. I knew they thought the story was over. That ID made my point and would now fade into the background like they'd wanted. They were wrong. Because while the house was empty, something else was taking shape. Something I'd been building slowly and deliberately over long nights and early mornings. I wasn't leaving chaos behind. I was leaving the truth. And soon, they would have no choice but to open the door and face it. The buyers took possession on a Friday morning. I didn't go to the house while they moved in. I didn't need to. I'd already been there earlier that week, alone, when the rooms were stripped bare, and the air smelled faintly of dust and lemon cleaner. I'd walked through once, slowly, touching nothing, listening to my footsteps echo like I was in someone else's memory. I brought one box. It wasn't heavy, just paper. I set it on the kitchen counter, right where Mark used to lay out the bills and Emily used to spread her binders. The counter still had a faint scratch from the time I'd dropped a screwdriver years ago. I'd meant to sand it down but never got around to it. The box held a single binder, black, thick, the kind accountants use. On the spine in block letters I'd written, "What disappears?" Inside were tabs, clean and labeled. Mortgage payments, insurance and utilities, education and medical, wedding expenses, extras. Each section held copies of checks, bank statements, and notes in my handwriting, dates, amounts, no opinions, no insults. Just facts. On top of the binder, I placed a single envelope addressed to Emily. Not Mark. Emily. I stood there for a long time after setting it down. Then I left. The call came that afternoon. It wasn't Mark. It was Emily's fiancé, Josh. I'd met him a few times. Polite, quiet, the kind of man who let things happen around him and called it peace. "What is this?" he asked, his voice tight. "Open it," I said. There was a pause, the sound of paper shifting, and a sharp breath. "My God," he muttered. Mark must have been there, too. I could hear him crying in the background. Emily's voice rose, sharp and panicked. "This is manipulative. She planned this." "I documented it," I said. "There's a difference. You're trying to embarrass us." Mark sobbed. "I'm telling the truth," I replied, for the first time. They were in the house then, the empty one. Neighbors were likely drifting past, as the new owners weren't due until the next day. I imagined Emily flipping through it, her fingers stopping on numbers she'd never noticed before. The $2,250 monthly mortgage payment, the 4.2% interest rate I'd locked in 12 years earlier, the $6,800 for her braces, the $14,900 venue deposit, all paid from my accounts. Under extras, I'd added things she'd forgotten. Gas money for her trips home from UT Austin, her car insurance deductibles, the winter I covered her rent when her roommate bailed. At the end was the letter. "Emily, you asked me to disappear. This is what disappears when I do. There's no anger in this. Just accounting. I hope your wedding day is still beautiful. I won't be there to see it. Sarah." "Did you know about all this?" I heard Josh ask Emily on the line. Silence. That silence was louder than any yelling could have been. By evening, the story had spread through the local church circles and wedding guests. There was no rumor to correct the truth, was already labeled, tabbed, and laid out on the counter. An email arrived from Josh the next morning. "I didn't know. I'm sorry. I don't think we're ready to get married." I read it twice, then closed my laptop. Mark sent one final message later that day. "I wish you'd fought harder." I typed back one sentence. "I did. Quietly. For years." That was the last thing I ever said to him. Summer slid into fall. I settled into a rhythm in my rental. One afternoon in October, Rick stopped by. "A lot of folks saw what you did," he said. "Not the selling part. The other part. The binder. The truth. They noticed. That winter, I bought a place of my own, smaller, paid for outright, with a yard just big enough for me. I thought about Emily sometimes, not with anger, but with a distant sadness. I hope she learned something. What I took with me wasn't money or property. I took my dignity. I took my time. They asked me to disappear. What they never understood was this. When you push someone out who's been holding everything together, you don't just lose them. You lose the weight they carried in silence. Thank you for listening to my story all the way through. If it resonated with you, give it a like, comment on what touched you the most, and be sure to mention where you're from. Subscribe to the channel. There are plenty more stories to come.